let's hop on the ship that's slowly sinking. Tony Khan needs a plug in his hole because he's taking on water. This past Wednesday night, they did that thing they do every week. They did it again. I don't know if you got the ratings yet, but if you don't, maybe you can look up something on that by the time we get finished with this. But we're starting to see what potentially a post-punk regime looks like, and it ain't good. And we're starting to see now that more of the people that we would have wanted to see elevated are probably going to be even harder to find at this point, now that we know, again, who Tony has fallen for in his judgment. Speaking of another Tony, though, at the top of the program, what has happened to poor Tony Schiavone's voice? I mean, it was rough, and I can commiserate with voice problems. Several years ago, remember on the podcast when I was back doing announcing, I would have numerous issues with my voice. But his is at the start of the show, and it's not like he's done a bunch of shit previously. I'm wondering, is he still doing other announcing or some of the other radio work that he was doing in Atlanta or whatever before? Because he sounded like old Uncle Elijah. He's like 105. Did you notice that, or do you tune the commentary out when Ian Riccaboni's not on?
You know, I think Ian's good. I don't think Ian's the bee's knees, but I think that Tony has not sounded like a young Tony Schiavone in a long time. Maybe I have to go back and check it and notice anything especially bad, but
at the open of the show, it was rough.
You know, during the matches, it's become a running gag for me and everyone else. He doesn't say anything. Oh, look at him. Oh, I'm really digging this. Oh, this is great. Oh, you're right about that. So, I mean, I don't know what talking he's done that would have hurt his vocal cords in the last few months. Baseball season's over. Didn't he used to do minor league baseball?
I don't know, but I hope he's doing well. Speaking of doing well, here comes the star of our show right off the bat. They played Judas, and boy, is he living up to the song. I'm telling you, the most popular heel in wrestling history enters to a sing-along of his theme music from the fans with his Stooges and his baseball bat. Isn't Sting pissed about trademark infringement? Hadn't he been doing the bat for 20 years? Now Jericho's got a black bat.
Where's Sting?
Where's Sting? Then here comes Claudio Castagnoli and Wheeler Useless. And the opening of the program is Claudio and Useless, the Blackpool Combat Club, against Jericho and Danny Garcia from the Jericho Appreciators. And think about that. Let everybody get this visual picture in your mind. A wrestling ring in an arena. One side is Claudio Castagnoli and Wheeler Yuta, and the other side is Chris Jericho and Daniel Garcia. And it looked like if they had Pro-Am wrestling, like they have Pro-Am golf, where if somebody contributes enough money to whatever the charity is, they get to play with a pro on their team. There's Jericho and there's Claudio, and then there's the two amateurs. That I'm not saying that they're even the worst wrestlers in the world, but my God, visually, is this what you want to see? On the first match, opposite, you know, they're in a promotional war with this, whatever you say about the WWE, all of their guys mostly look like athletes. Yuta looks like an ironing board wearing tights. I mean, the match was what it was, right? And Claudio's never bad. Jericho's lost weight. He's working because now he knows he's got everybody in his pocket. But now I find it fascinating that whenever they're having a tag team match and there's two guys in the ring, as there usually is legally and during any part of a tag team match, the other guys now not only don't work the corner, but they just get out on the floor and just completely leave the ring and not even selling. At one point, when Claudio and Jericho were in, Yuta he wasn't working the corner. He was standing on the stairs, crouched down, leaning on the ring post, looking like he was hiding, waiting to come back in at the right spot. And then they did it multiple times. Somebody will roll out and just obviously be hiding behind the apron, peeking up and watching when it's their time to come in again. They've lost the complete fucking plot of this thing. And then their break spot, which came 8 minutes into the show, was Hager from the outside tripping Claudio while referee Aubrey Ed Wilbur was staring at him doing it. They didn't even make an attempt to distract her. And then they go to the break. I got to be honest with you. With this match going on, 8 minutes into the show, I've still got time to find something else that I can see almost from the start. I wouldn't have gone to break 8 minutes in the show on this fucking match. But anyway, they come back. Now Claudio and Jericho are both down, and Garcia is kneeling on the floor outside the ring by the apron, but they get a camera shot of him. He's just staring up, waiting for something else in the ring to happen. I mean, a babyface, if you were just thrown together in a tag team, the guy that was selling back in the old days, if his partner wasn't working the apron, reaching for a tag, trying to keep the people into it, the babyface that was selling would have words afterwards. Like, what the fuck? I'm in there getting my ass kicked, taking bumps, and you're just fucking wandering around outside? You fucking moron. And at the same time that Garcia was kneeling on the floor by the apron staring at what was going on, Useless was back over on the other side just climbing up the stairs from a bump that he took 45 seconds previously. And then fucking Claudio just cold tags Yuta, who doesn't come in the ring to make a comeback. He immediately jumps up to the top rope and splashes Jericho, gets a 2 count, and then gets on Garcia. I always talk about the horrible fake punches that these guys are throwing from the mount. These weren't even horrible fake punches. These were horrible fake girl punches. I mean, he wasn't trying to connect with anything. He was swinging sideways wildly like he was a 6-year-old girl having a fit about her pudding. And then he got up and made some mean faces. And then poor Stace, because the remodel is still going on, so she doesn't have the 85-inch out in the studio anymore. So she's sitting there and just stood up and said, that was outlaw as fuck, and fucking walked out. So that was the guy's big comeback. And then he tagged Claudio back in. Because that's another thing they do now. They tag the babyface to make the big comeback and go into the finish, but they forget to go in the finish, and they start tagging back and forth like the first part of the match never happened. God damn it. Useless dives. The referee got distracted. Jericho came in with a bat, but as he swung, Claudio powerbombed him, and Jericho dropped the bat. So Aubrey turns around and sees Jericho laying in the ring and sees the bat bigger than fucking Christmas laying right next to him, and just stands there and she never makes a move. Nobody makes a move to get the bat, to take the bat out of the ring, or to disqualify anybody, because the bat's in the ring. And then Claudio, in the only thing that made this match really worth watching, gets Jericho in the big swing with Garcia on his back in a fireman's carry and does about 10 revolutions. And then, of course, Claudio goes to the floor and levels all the Stooges, and then goes back in the ring and hits a finish on Jericho, 1, 2, 3. When have you seen that happen last time? That Jericho would get pinned 1, 2, 3 on Tellular Vision. It's all part of the plan. It's perfect. The one time that he puts somebody over, it's Claudio, a guy that everybody likes, and that also is perfect timing for Jericho to say, see, I'm back, and I'm going to help in creative and I'm going to put young guys over. And now that we've got rid of the cancer in the locker room that was preventing me from being the top star in this fucking dog and pony show, I'm going to be real giving for the next few weeks until people get the impression that I'm giving. And then I will slowly slip back into beating the fuck out of everybody, including every ex-Ring of Honor champion they can possibly book. Do you think they're falling for this too now, aren't they? All of a sudden, the benevolent, kind, humble, and lovable shoeshine boy, Chris Jericho, doing jobs at this particular point in time. Brian, do you see that coming down the road?
Do I see what coming down the road?
This whole Jericho company man thing at this particular point in time, right now, when he's getting everything going his way, brand new contract, creative spot. Got to make sure all the boys are on my side so that they don't realize that I've planned this all along and have instigated this to get this far. I mean, he's got plenty of practice studying insurrections, does Jericho?
Well, certainly his family does, but it's not really an insurrection when, you know, you have a clear path because you outplayed everyone. This is what Jericho wants. Jericho did not want CM Punk there. Jericho was the first person that loudly said he wanted CM Punk fired. Made a lot of sense. Chris Jericho's booking has been atrocious for a long time, and now it's going to be total nonstop Jericho.
And we heard Chris Jericho came out at that media deal and said, oh, MJF's got to be babyface immediately. Like anybody who hadn't been in the wrestling business for 20 years would know that the exact thing that you don't do with a generational talent like MJF is change him up. That's why they like him, because they've liked what he's been. But if he can take the edge off MJF and diminish his popularity, then he's got rid of the veteran, and now he's minimalized the up-and-coming prospect. And as I mentioned earlier in the program, Danielson and Moxley are too busy being nice to everybody and wanting everybody to like them and doing their own version of the wrestling they like. Danielson's we do like, and Moxley's we can't stand.
Every time Yuta does anything, I just expect him to go, this is for the juggalos and juggalettes. Fuck this shit!
Is he, oh, that's what I was going to say, is he one of those juggaloos? But he looks like how can I
He looks like
this?
Superhuman. I'm going to save you from whatever you're about to say.
Well, I was going to try to give some context because if he looks like Superhuman, most normal people are going to go, what is he talking about? There is a mentally challenged individual who apparently has no one in his family with the good sense to watch him or take care of him or prevent him from making bad choices, that is famous for jumping off of shit through shit like wrestlers do and hurting himself on Twitter. And yeah, he does. He looks like fucking Superhuman. The best part of this match was that it was over and we go to the waiting arms of Renee Moxley Good so that she can have a talk with Bryan Danielson. And they're in the back. Danielson is frustrated about Jericho and Garcia and Yuta. He's frustrated about everybody. And then Yuta comes in and yells at Daniel Bryan, and Claudio comes in and separates them like, now we're going to sit down and discuss this like adults. So now the baby faces are fighting amongst themselves. And if it means that Danielson will eventually turn out of this, then great. I don't care how it happens, but I don't have any confidence that that's what they're setting up. I think the baby faces are just arguing because Tony thinks it might be swell.
I think that there is nothing stopping them from pushing Wheeler Yuta in a way that isn't reasonable and that nobody really wants, but he is their Eric Watts right now, and his promos, I told you last time, he has a Seth Rollins screech when he talks, so it sounds bad, but where's this coming from? This fucking guy who did nothing, all of a sudden he's with them, and now he's yelling at Bryan Danielson?
Yeah, talking to him like a fucking field hand.
And the fans sat on their hands for a lot of this match, and that's not a unique thing for this match or this show or wrestling right now. I mean, it's across all the promotions that are on TV that you see that. But they were into Claudio. I don't know how into Yuta the fans are. It's not just us, I don't think.
I think it's, again, the same. What have we determined now? Is it 600,000 or 700,000 people that love the whole elite thing and love the whole Harpo thing and love all the play wrestlers are going to love Yuta because he's been embraced by all their favorites. And everybody who wants to watch a Major League Wrestling program on national television is sitting there and go, what the fuck is this? All right. Speaking of what the fuck is this, so they had a video going to the break of the elite, Matt and Jeff Hardley, and Twinkle Toes McFingerbang, and they did some special effects to where they hit their pose in the ring or they do whatever, then suddenly they vanish. It's like they burst into flame, or the effect is that they're disappearing off the screen. And so obviously this is some kind of play on, oh, the founders had suddenly been erased from our history, and what's it going to mean from here? If the elite can really be made to evaporate, can we do a GoFundMe and make it happen permanently? I'll put up the first large chunk of money. But what? Obviously, and the three of them, the Three Stooges, were backstage at the television taping. That's been reported.
With Don Callis.
With Don Fallis. Well, he, like fungus on a shower curtain, he'll show back up just when you think it's gone. So now what are they trying to get? Is this the start of a thing where they're coming back and they're pissed off because their legacy and their contributions, such as they were to this company, were erased and now they've got a chip on their shoulder? Or is it just a thing to get people talking, their version of White Rabbit, and they're just going to show back up? And remember last time Twinkle Toes showed back up, he'd been gone like 9 months, and people tuned out and said, please go away some more.
I think they're going to come back and they're going to try to make the fans feel guilty for not appreciating them because they went away and everyone just moved on. And they're going to come back and they're going to try to make it all about them again, and we'll see how the fans take to it. It'll certainly be very interesting.
What happened when Twinkle Toes was gone for 9 months? Did the ratings fall in a hole? They didn't do any $1 million gates or any, record pay-per-views except for the ones they did that Punk was on top of.
No, it didn't. The other thing is, you could argue about Omega because at least he's a main event singles wrestler. Did it hurt them at all not having the Young Bucks the last few months?
Well, that's another thing. I was going to ask that next. What about the Cucamonga Kids? Have the ratings fallen in a hole? Has there been massive chants of their names? Have people been setting the seats on fire? We want the Bucks. No, everything's exactly the same. Maybe a little better because we don't have to watch them wrestle. But I guarantee you, they're going to find out none of those numbers are going to be the same without Punk, because he was the difference. Anyway, so then we've got Tony Schiavone with Chris Jericho and Sammy Guevara and Ty Mello Conti and I think Anna Jay and the other Jericho appreciators. There was like 9 or 10 people in this shot backstage, and they had audio trouble with their microphone. It was going in and out, and Jericho was, of course, mad about losing, pitching a fit about that. And then, as he's saying, well, he's, putting out a dare, he's going to defend and he's going to beat all the former Ring of Honor world champions and show how prestigious his title is. In addition to the audio trouble, which old Sockface apologized for when they went back to the announce desk, as Jericho's saying, I'm the greatest and I'm going to beat all the former Ring of Honor champions and all this stuff. One of the fucking crew members' heads popped up into the lower screen in the shot. I guess maybe he's trying to move a boom in quicker to be able to pick it up because their microphone didn't work. It looked like cable access.
I loved it. This was my favorite segment of the show. Just all the technical problems here. I couldn't tell if it was a head or a boom, or the
it was a guy's. It was a big gray-headed crew member. It better not have been a boom microphone. It was as big as a fucking bushel basket.
Hey, let me ask you something. The Young Bucks and Omega are back. CM Punk is likely gone. Chris Jericho hates CM Punk. Defending the title against the former Ring of Honor champions. Are they going to bring Colt Cabana back on TV to wrestle Chris Jericho?
Wait a minute. Was he ever the champion? Early on, did they make that mistake? While you look up the Ring of Honor title lineage, I will move on to the next match that was a crime against nature. And another example of what we're going to be putting up with now that the inmates are once again in charge of the asylum. A number one contenders match for the AEW tag team title. Keith Lee and Swerve Strickland against FTR. Not only were FTR derailed, the planned dropping of the AEW tag team title to them was canceled in favor of the kids being able to play without the parents around. FTR's been diminished. They still hold every other tag team title in the world, but of course that doesn't mean anything. Here in the United States of America, it means nothing that they're carrying the Ring of Honor belts or the AAA belts or the goddamn New Japan belts. Unless they have the real belts, the AEW belts that are the primary tag team title for this company and this program. That would have made the other three mean something in addition. As it is, they're two of 25 people wandering around with belts or multiple belts that are not related to the promotion we're watching. So they've given them a bunch of belts that mean nothing. You never see them defend any of them. They never wrestle on television except in singles where they lose. And now the people, even though they still get a pop and they still like them whenever they come out, every time they see them come out, they know they either ain't going to get to see them wrestle or they definitely ain't going to see them win. And they've been diminished because they were a threat to the two children that think that they're the greatest tag team in the world because a senile resident of Campbell by the Sea, California, has told them that because they spoke nice to him. And instead, the best tag team in the business now came out here and did everything they could to get Keith Lee and Swerve Strickland over. And the problem is that while Swerve is fairly talented, Keith Lee and Swerve are a rotten tag team combination with no experience with each other as a tag team combination and doesn't apparently not a lot of good ideas or strategy. And I think we now, the verdict is in on Keith Lee in the WWE. I said, boy, I'd keep him. He's something when we looked at their roster a year and a half ago or whatever. But since it's another, like an Adam Cole situation, apparently they, instead of keeping him under their thumb in the WWE and preventing him from getting over on his own, he's another guy that they presented at his best and brightest exposure and kept him away from his worst influences. They didn't like his promo. He wouldn't change it. Apparently, they probably didn't like his weight. He didn't change that. So they fired him, and now he's doing the same promo. His weight's out of control. And mother of pearl, he's got to be a chore to work with watching this match. And the Acclaimed and Billy Gunn and the Ass Boys were in the arena watching this. And of course, the crowd hijacked the match at the bell, at the opening bell, chanting "Scissor me, Daddy," because now again, the booking has led to FTR being the most popular tag team in the company 6 weeks ago, and the tag team champions taking a back seat to "Scissor me, Daddy Ass." Cash and Swerve actually wrestled. Cash is better at it than Swerve, but Swerve ain't bad, and Cash put himself in the right place for all the Swerve stuff. And Dax got in, and then here came Keith Lee. And both Dax and Cash put Lee's size and strength over as best they could. Lee can move in short bursts, but it looks like he needs twice as long in between to recover from a short burst. And this could not have been easy to try to put this together on FTR's part. They went through a break. When they came back, the fans were sitting on their hands because Swerve and Keith Lee were in control of Cash, getting the heat on him. That meant they were dictating the pace, and it was blah. And then finally, for the first sign of life in about 10 minutes, Cash actually made a hot tag to Dax. He figured out a way to do it where they didn't see it coming. Did you see the comeback that Dax made on this, Brian?
I watched a match, yeah.
I'll tell you what, everybody's talking about backstage fucking fights and shoots. If I'd have been Dax Harwood, and this was the most that I got out of a motherfucker selling for my comeback, there'd have been a bigger fight in the locker room. Dax comes in with 3 jabs and 2 rights, and then 4 chops. Swerve has not taken the first fucking bump yet and started fighting back. I don't know that I can remember maybe an Andre the Giant match where a babyface made a fucking tag and the heel didn't take one bump for his comeback. So, hold on. 3 jabs, 2 rights, 4 chops. Swerve is staggering, ain't left his feet. Started fighting back. Dax shut him down and hit 12 more chops. Swerve took no bump and started fighting back. Keith Lee came over and took 7 chops, no bump, and started fighting back. Meanwhile, Cash was out hiding on the floor below the apron because his cue hadn't come up yet. And there's FTR trying to do this convoluted and complicated finish that they've set up for a tag team that if a tag team had been competent, it might have gotten them over. But as it was, Swerve and Keith Lee couldn't do this. So FTR was trying to call college mathematics with an amateur fucking grade school math class. And at one point, they did the roll-up deal where Swerve would do an O'Connor roll-up on Dax, and then Dax would kick him off, and Swerve would jump up on the turnbuckle, turn around, cross-body off. Bobby Eaton, Bobby Fulton, Fantastics Midnight Express, many heels and baby faces throughout history. Dax kicks off out of the roll-up, Swerve goes to the buckle and jumps up on the turnbuckle facing inside the ring. He didn't jump up facing out and do a turnaround crossbody. He tried to jump up on the turnbuckles already looking in the ring and slipped off the fucking ropes and fell right at goddamn Dax's feet. Before he went all the way down, he recovered and jumped up and crossbodied Dax off the mat. And Dax had to fall backwards with that. And then FTR hit Swerve with everything. Several moves in a row and got a 2 count. And then they did a sloppy deal where Swerve kicked Dax off the apron and tagged Keith Lee. But Swerve couldn't do the fucking deal that he tried to do right. I don't fucking know. It made no sense for the heels to do it anyway, because it looked almost like a babyface thing. They gave Cash a huge power bomb off Keith Lee's shoulders that he threw Cash into Swerve, power bomb, boom, and Cash kicked out. They're about to, I'm not going to spoil anything when I say FTR's about to do the job anyway. So goddamn, that looked like if you ought to do a job for anything, that's what you ought to get beat by, but that was a 2 count. And then they did more complicated shit. And Dax hit a slingshot powerbomb on Swerve. And Keith Lee hit a big shoulder tackle on Dax. And Cash drop kicked Keith. And Keith Lee, of course, no-sold that and head-butted Cash and got a 2 count. FTR can't whip the fucking fans is what I wrote in my notes. Then they got Keith Lee's massive ass on the top rope and tried the superplex splash that they do, Dax and Cash. But Keith Lee could barely get up there, and then he could barely push off, and it wasn't like Dax was going to send him all the way to the middle on his own, so Keith Lee got turned over and landed on the superplex like 5 feet from the corner. Well, Cash could have made it with the splash because he did, but when Keith Lee didn't go over and land flat, he landed rolling because he's as round as he is tall, and he has to flap his arms. You can tell whether he's rolling or walking. So he rolls up and onto his stomach and out of the way of the splash that Cash has already left the top rope for. And instead of sitting right back down, remembering what was going to happen to him, he went with it and rolled all the way over on his belly, and Cash barely grazed Keith Lee's back with the splash. Oh, my God. Somehow they hit the big rig on Keith Lee, but Swerve made the save, so now they've hit their finish. And that hadn't worked after these guys have not taken a goddamn bump for him or sold anything. And then Swerve hits a nut shot on Dax, and Keith Lee hits his finish on him while the ass boys have Cash on the floor holding him so he can't make the save. So that shitty little piece of business was the finish. Instead of, they could have beat him 5 minutes before that with that big power bomb, and they wouldn't have kicked out of their finish, and they wouldn't no-sold some other shit. But they couldn't have got the big story in at the end with the fucking ass boys holding Cash out. That's apparently supposed to give FTR an excuse for losing, when through the whole match, these middle card guys dominated them at every opportunity and sold jack all of shit for them. So that Lee and Swerve took most of the match, none of the bumps, foiled everything that FTR tried to do, survived their finish, and beat them. Hello.
Well, the Bucks are back. FTR lost on TV. Omega's back. Rio's on TV.
We'll get there.
For what it was a good match with a lot of problems. I like Swerve, and as sloppy as he may be at times, he wasn't the problem here. I've been a Keith Lee fan and supporter in the past, but it cannot be easy to work with him. If you like him and you just watch these matches, it cannot be easy to be in the ring and try to make a match happen with him. Am I wrong?
No, it's like working with a fucking mattress. It just, the size and unwieldy nature of it alone is everything's going to look, and you can't, even if he knows where he's supposed to go, FTR made the finish too complicated. And that was their finish, because the other two was not capable of coming up with all that. If it had been a great tag team that could keep up with him, it'd been one thing, but you can't even turn Keith Lee's momentum. If he's going south, you can't turn him and get him going north, nor can he do it for himself without a wide swing around the corner.
Let me ask you 2 questions about all this. One, actually, I guess it's one question. I'm not against the idea of doing the third match although after watching this, I don't, Keith Lee's getting rough to watch in the ring, but I'm not against doing the idea of the Acclaimed against Swerve and Keith Lee, the third match. Each one match. It's kind of what should have happened with FTR and the Young Bucks.
Right.
But does the end result of that match being the winning team eventually dropping the belts to FTR excuse the fact that this team, which were the number one contenders for months and have all these other belts, just did a clean job on TV?
No,
the idea that we'll get the title after the fact?
No, because it still doesn't, because it's not, somebody out there goes, well, it's a rule of thumb that before a person or team should win a title, that they should do a number of jobs for other people so they have challengers ready to go. Yeah, in a perfect world, that is correct. When those stars had been built up properly and gotten over as a level of main eventers, and those stars are on television regularly being featured, and the matches that they had with those people are good, so you'd want to see them again. And all of those things have to come into play also. And then you can do a bunch of jobs and then win a title and it means something. But if you do a bunch of jobs When, again, from the start, and they're not alone, none of these people had a proper promotional push. It was a joke. They come in, they have long main event matches and get beat, and then after they're there for a year, they start beating job guys in 5 minutes. That's for everybody on the whole roster. So they've never had a coherent promotional push. They never had somebody giving them the ball and letting them run with it. The fans got FTR over on their own because they're obviously clearly the best and excel every time you see them. And that caused, the California raisins to go, oh, shit, we got to put an end to this. How can we do this without it being obvious? And all the little tricks that go along with it. Always lose the single match every time. Always lose the big tag match and then win something less important and less high profile. Don't be seen regularly when the people are cheering for you or when the live crowd cheers for you. Put you on pre-tape. And then sooner or later, people will move on and they'll come to find the new shiny thing. Oh, the guy that raps and his partner and they scissor daddy ass. We like that now because we're seeing a lot of them. And they're not a threat to the EVPs because they're young kids that will do what they're told. They're over with the fans, but they're not fucking accomplished professionals and in-ring geniuses like goddamn Dax and Cash. So the Bucks don't have to worry about being shown up there. So it's all amenable to the people that are really running the company, not the owner and boss, Tony Khan, but the people he's hired to supposedly make his business bigger. They do that as long as it doesn't interfere with them being on top or their friends being able to play with them. So, speaking of friends playing, Renee Moxleygood was in the back with Saraya, where they exchanged girl talk, and then Britt Baker came in and they exchanged girl arguing. And then we went to a commercial, we came back, and Renee Moxleygood was on the ramp now. And she introduced, what an amazing introduction. Here it is word for word. Joining me right now, MJF. Now, I know some people are going to say, well, she shouldn't give MJF a big build-up for an introduction because MJF is about to try to take the world title away from her husband. And I agree with you, which is probably a real good reason why she shouldn't be doing the fucking interview. Jesus H. Christ. And if it was a legitimate situation, then the guy's wife would not want to interview the guy that's going to try to fuck him around. And they got 18 interviewers. Marvez was still around, old Officer Barbrady. He hoked up the last segment. But anyway, so here comes MJF. The MJF chants, the devil has arrived in Virginia. And I've noted, Renee asks questions like a WWE interviewer. It's very stilted and stagey, and it's a prepared question. It doesn't rattle off the tongue. It doesn't come off the top of the head.
That's been the biggest thing about her in here so far. It's been apparent that she's doing a WWE style, and it's terrible.
Well, but it seems like somebody could say, okay, you don't have to do that now anymore, like they used to make you.
Even the thing in the back, it's much better when you go to the interview and someone's standing there with the people. Not now she has to introduce everyone and they walk in from a step over and then you have to see them and no one says anything for a weird, awkward second. Don't do that. She's not Gene Okerlund. She's another interviewer.
Anyway, so and I know that's the only place she's ever been, WWE. So she's never actually been in the wrestling business. But you would think that if you watch television, you'd know how to do a natural interview. But nevertheless, MJF was great, imitated Moxley. I'm going to drink your bones and eat your blood or whatever. And he was hilarious there, told Renee to shut up. Promised that he was going to wrestle the title match relatively clean, and he was winking, it's not all the way, you know me. You can see what they're trying to do here already. Instead of leaning into how they should worship him and telling the people that they're obviously dreck and paupers and beneath him, but he understands why they worship him. Now he's being friendly with them, and he's bringing them in. And what am I right, Virginia? Because Jericho's getting his way, and he doesn't, even though Jericho doesn't want heat, and that's a good thing because he doesn't have any. He wants to be the top heel, and he can't do that with MJF around. So the first thing after, showing up day late and a dollar short after the brawl, and then saying, Punk, you're a cancer to the business, and then getting in Tony Khan's ear about that. Now he's figured out a way to fucking move MJF over to the side and diminish him, because what's going to happen is they're still going to love MJF for a while. But after what's happened at the end of this program, we'll get to in a minute, when you put MJF in a sympathetic position, you've just screwed the pooch. You have, what was it that Kevin Sullivan said after they beat Goldberg? Well, it was Heenan. We just killed the goose that ate the golden leg. Ate the golden leg. We just killed the goose that laid the golden egg. He promised he wasn't going to use the diamond ring, did MJF, because he wants to show Regal up. He did a fired up promo about Moxley, but he's going to win on behalf of every scumbag who told him he wasn't good enough. Because apparently that's a big thing with the modern generation. People have told them all their lives that they weren't good enough and they weren't going to be able to do this. And apparently these fucking suckers actually believe these people and get upset about it. Instead of going, how about this? Can I turn it up for you? Fuck you. Feed you some fish heads. That's your opinion. Go on about your business. Everybody takes this to heart and is mentally scarred by these people saying these horrible things to them. So when MJF says, I'm going to get back at every scumbag who told me I wasn't good enough, the whole crowd's like, yeah, because we got a bunch of those too. I don't have one motherfucker in my 60 years in life that I want to get back at that told me I wasn't good enough, because the only ones that ever said that, I'd already was good enough and had been so good for so long that I was there for them to say that to. And I didn't believe them when they said it then, because I think I'm better than they are and I think they're idiots. But now what they're going to do is they're going to have MJF a sympathetic figure. When's the last time you had sympathy for Satan? When is the last time that you felt bad for Charles Manson? When is the last time that you just, God dang it, if things had just turned out better and he hadn't been bullied in school, I bet Hitler would have been a better fellow. You don't do this. Stokely Hathaway comes out, or that is his name now. Malcolm Bivens, not Stokely Hathaway. I call him Stokely Carmichael so much. He comes out and MJF slaps his microphone away and tells him, don't touch Moxley or you're fired. By this point, Renee Moxley Good had completely disappeared and the crowd finished MJF's catchphrase. Here's the problem. Again, with no leadership and no experience at the top, it was easy for Tony to be manipulated into believing that MJF should be a babyface, because he technically already was. But the reason why he already was is because he was so talented and so unique, and he was a heel, and they fucking hated him until he became the best thing on the whole fucking show. For the variety of reasons of attrition and poor talent choices. So then the people are cheering him out of the building. And if he was continuing to do what he was still doing and take advantage of that, say, yes, you're right, you should worship me. Drop down on your knees. Give me 5 hallelujahs. Now he's being nice to him. He's bringing him into it. He's working with them. And he's going to be popular and over for a while, but sooner or later, unless somebody smartens up and they switch him back quick, and then it will still diminish him because it happened at all, they're taking away the part of the devil that you were intrigued by enough to get close enough to him to sell him your fucking soul. So I understand Tony with no experience, no knowledge, no insight, believing somebody with experience said, oh, you got to make MJF a babyface because people are cheering him. The problem is Tony set up a situation where the boss is a complete novice and has to be relying on people like that who have their own agendas and their own reasons for giving him advice because he's not smart enough to know the difference. So anyway, it's so soon, so rushed, so wrong. Stokely has been here, 6 weeks? Remember when... Well, you don't remember, Brian, you weren't born, but you know it happened, and you've seen footage since then. But when Dusty Rhodes switched babyface in 1974 in the Florida Territory, broke loose from Gary Hart's army, like Pak Song Nam, the evil Korean assassin, and whoever else Gary was managing, wasn't it Missouri Mauler? The people had been wanting it to happen for months and months. Dusty had been getting started cheered because of his promo and because of his charisma, even when he was in the heel group. And Eddie Graham was smart enough to realize that, but he wanted the people to call it themselves, and he wanted them to really want it. So he milked it, and he milked it. And Gary Hart's group, Gary Hart had been in Florida as a manager for years. He was a heel through and through, and his group was a main event group. And all these people had been interacting for months and months on every week's TV. And it got to the point where Dusty, still as a heel, was getting so popular with the fans, the famous spot. They gave Dusty Rhodes a match against Jack Briscoe for the NWA title. And Briscoe, of everywhere in the country, he was the biggest babyface in Florida. He'd been the hero there for years. And Jack Briscoe, when Dusty dropped the fucking elbow on him and covered him, 1-2, Briscoe had to put his foot on the ropes to cause a break. He almost lost to Dusty Rhodes fair and square. If he hadn't been that close to the ropes, the people popped. And they were not happy that Dusty didn't win. And that's when Eddie Graham knew it was time to do the deal. And as a result, not only did the territory sell out in every major market for months and months on end, it was the best run of business in the history of Florida wrestling, but it made Dusty Rhodes one of the top box office attractions in the business for the next fucking 15 years. Or they can do it with a mid-card manager that's been in the company for 6 weeks with a group of job guys that we barely saw, that had never been together before last month. And then they can just, okay, well, now it's time to do that. Here we go. Your thoughts?
The problem is both options here are not good. And you have to wonder, MJF's still a young guy, and there's a lot of people there who have been around wrestling for a long time. You have to wonder if he's hearing the wrong thing from people. Because another thing that we realize, at least I do, you tell me if you think I'm wrong, but out of everyone there, he has the most potential to be the biggest star, and in doing so, being a bigger star than everyone who's currently in AEW.
Yeah.
Like, MJF's future in wrestling is bigger than what Chris Jericho's past was. And I'm not saying that as an insult to Jericho. If things work out the way they should, the trajectory continues, that's the way it is. So I would...
Starting in 2024.
Yeah, so if everyone there is telling him you need to be a babyface, you need to be a babyface, maybe you also need to consider where it's coming from. Who amongst these people is a wrestling expert? But I said it's one of two things, and they're both bad. It's either that this is an attempt to rush an MJF babyface turn, which I'm not happy with, or potentially even worse, it's a big swerve, and MJF, it'll turn out, plan this whole thing out to trick Moxley and Regal, and they went as far as him getting his ass kicked by his own group to swerve people, See, I'm not happy with any of this MJF booking right now. None of the options.
And also what you said, I can firmly believe that a bunch of the young guys on the roster are going, "Hey, MJF, you're so popular, you're gonna be a big baby face," and they think that'd be a good thing. But no. And Jericho stooged himself. He said it in public at that media thing. "Oh yeah, MJF's gonna have to be a baby face here. He's gonna be our big baby face real soon." Yeah. And that's what he's wanting. He's moved Punk to the side. Now he's going to fucking minimize MJF. And there you go. The field is clear. Because nobody with that long experience in the wrestling business cannot see. And I think MJF knows. Because he can't. What do you think MJF is thinking now? How do I put my matches together as a babyface? What the fuck? He has impeccable matches, perfect matches. Everything makes sense. Everything gets across. How can he do that as a babyface and maintain everything about him that got him over? The promos, he's doing it somewhat, but when the devil loses his edge and becomes the kindly old cranky guy down the street, then he softens. It wasn't right. Steve Austin didn't just come out and suddenly start fucking clanging bottles of fucking milk together. He did exactly the same thing he'd always done. The people called it and the opponents changed, but he didn't. Do you ever recall a time where Steve Austin was a heel and then became the baby face, but the heels came out and kicked the shit out of him and left him laying for that to happen?
The other thing is last week we had this amazing promo with him and Regal and all that. Did Regal say boo on this episode? MJF got a long promo. I'm not necessarily crazy about all this Stokely stuff.
He did color on the Jericho Appreciators match.
What would have been more effective, that or him coming out there for a minute on that stage in front of that crowd and saying something to pump people up for that match? Fresh off last week's promo, instead of not having him do anything like that. Make people remember the good shit and keep doing it. I don't know. That's my 2 cents.
Well, if you paid 2 cents for this program, inflation really is running rampant in the country today. Anyway, the next event, Bryan Danielson versus Sammy Guevara with his main squeeze Ty Meloconti. And I always want to like everything Bryan Danielson does. And he was so brilliant, not only there for a while, but consistently. But I couldn't get into this match as much as I normally do with Danielson stuff. I mean, it was a modern style match. At least Danielson takes his time and everything that he does looks good. But Sammy started kicking at the opening, started kicking the shit out of Danielson for a while. And then Bryan comes back out and gets the Romero special. So, I mean, Sammy just got all over him and just beat the piss out of him. And then Bryan gets this great technical hold. And they, then finally going to the break, Sammy takes back over on him and does a big backflip. And they come back, and it was really Sammy getting heat on Danielson and just kicking and or chopping. And finally he kicked him, 20 times. And Bryan just gets up and starts a comeback with chops and kicks. Lots of kicks. There was a dive in there and then some more kicks and then a bunch of flips. And then Danielson got the label lock. Sammy got a rope break, and then they both got up and set up to do a double backflip off the fucking top rope. And then Danielson finally just hits his running knee and did the stomps, got him in a triangle, hit him with the elbows, and the referee just stopped it. Okay, that's enough. Normally I'd say, okay, the babyface beats the heel clean. No out. Sammy's in the doghouse or whatever the fuck anyway. But this is like another match or another finish they have in almost every other match. The finish comes out of nowhere and it's flat. And whether the heel loses or the babyface loses, nobody has an out or nobody has a bitch or nobody Nobody got fucked, or the heel didn't deserve to get fucked. It just ends. And they don't build to they think building to a climax is all these multiple over and over sequences of moves that they do that are faster and faster, but you don't have to do 100 things. When you build to a finish, the 1, 2, 3, or the I quit, or the tap out, or whatever should be the big pop. And you should have been building to that point, whether it was 3 things that meant something or 100 that didn't. But but half the time in these days, or these matches, the biggest pops are in the middle. And then the finish is like, oh, wow, it was starting to get old. So I guess it was about time they did that. It's like if the best part of the movie was halfway in and then you still had to piss and get popcorn and sit through the finish. What do you think, Brian?
Well, you know what I've thought of Bryan Danielson's stuff recently, and I've not been happy to say that I have not really enjoyed his matches just because, I don't know, everything just seems kind of flat right now. With Sammy Guevara, I think I said it when we reviewed the roster. Here's a guy that could be such a great heel on that roster, but he's never on his own. Here he is, comes out with her. They're perfect together as a young heel couple you want to hate. And then, I don't know, his matches to me don't really do it. I mean, then he usually does one crazy spot. And
he's not working like a heel. He's still doing the big springboard into the jumping cutter off the top rope, or the back moonsault into the Asahara fucking water slide, or whatever the fuck they call everything. And that doesn't get any heat on him. His face and his girl do that, but then he wants to outshine the baby face and still impress people that he's crazy and he'll risk his neck so they'll cheer what he does even though they're supposed to hate him.
Is the Spanish fly off the top rope move the dumbest move in wrestling?
I don't know why. Why would you do that? Why would you take it? Why would anybody believe it? It just, okay, they stand there and, okay, let's go. And one guy back flips and one guy front flips. You can't tell who's pitching and who's catching. It should hurt both guys pretty much equally.
Should the physics of wrestling always be visual easily to the audience in your eyes? If that makes any sense?
It should easily be understandable visibly who executed the move and who took the brunt of the move. Who got hurt and who did it on purpose. That should easily and instantly be visually obvious, or elsewise you've fucked up. You really have. I can't think of anything. They say there's an exception to every rule, but in this case, I don't think there is. I don't think there is a good wrestling move that's ever been done where the audience didn't immediately know which guy got hurt and which guy did the move to the other guy. As speaking of what we don't understand, real briefly, Renee Moxley Good was in the back with Penthouse and Alex. We love Alex, and he barely had a chance to say anything. And then here came Christian Cage and Dino. They walked in when...
Was it Penthouse or Phoenix?
No, it was Penthouse and Alex.
Oh.
I thought it was Penthouse. Well, that's one of them. Alex was there.
Yeah, he was definitely there.
Yeah, it's Penthouse because he's going to wrestle for the AEW title later on, but they wanted to win the Atlantic title.
Right, it was his brother, Phoenix. Now you got me doing it. Phoenix.
Well, whichever. Point is, the one guy wants to win the All-Atlantic title, but Cage and Dino come in when they mention it because they want all the titles. Even though the guy that was standing there, Felix, if that was him, he was standing there, he was holding a belt. And then, as soon as they mention the Atlantic title and that they want it, then Pockets walks in holding that belt, and everybody stood and stared at each other, and Pockets just stared at the camera and didn't even look at the people that he was kind of mumbling to. And then it all was over. All righty, I know you watched the next match, Brian, because the lady you have a crush on that you think
Who's
is
that?
the savior of the women's division in AEW, Jamie Hayter.
I don't have a crush on her. I definitely think she's the savior of that division if they did the right thing, but I wouldn't say.
I got news for you. Moses couldn't save that division. Jamie Hayter with Reba and Britt Baker in her corner took on the returning Riho. Her name is Riho, and she don't weigh 90 pounds. And when she hits the mat, well, she barely makes a sound. And when she's booked, you know the house is always down. Oh, Riho, you're just a grade school clown.
How long did this match go?
About 3 days.
I thought maybe you had the real time here.
I ate 4 meals and shaved twice. No, I don't. It was endless. But that's the problem. And now we know Twinkle Toes is back because he's admitted it, and it's not even been called into question. He's not only been in charge of the women's division, but the Joshi princesses from Japan are his and his alone. That's his whole project. He's responsible. Blame him. This confused-looking, buck-toothed pet store clerk comes down wearing white chiffon. It looked like she was just stepped off the top of a wedding cake. But it occurred to me, just the mousy face and the confused demeanor, she looks like Talia Shire and Rocky. She was the pet store clerk. Yo, Adrian, she looks like a Japanese Adrian. She's confused at where her iguana has slipped away to. Those things they love to fucking hide. Dark places. Anyway.
See, what I think you're missing is the audience would be going insane if the entire building was like 12-year-old girls were into Riho for some reason.
If they were 12-year-old girls in Japan, I don't know the whole building would be going. She's never been in front of a whole building in Japan. Remember, these are the girls that wrestle in apartments. Bill Apter, 40 years ago, invented this. He didn't even realize it. Actually, it was Stanley Weston. I'm not going to blame Bill for that.
Yeah, and he realized it.
Yeah, the Japanese apartment house wrestling crew is in full force here. So a cacophony of silence meets Riho as she wanders down the ramp as she is giving up 6 inches and 40 pounds to Jamie Hayter by the announcer's mathematics. It was ridiculous. And Jamie Hayter has talent, but she had to either put herself into Riho's awkward bullshit or take her own bumps. It was so phony. And again, if this girl wanted to goddamn sell goldfish in, the Tokyo train station, I wouldn't have a problem with her. But as a professional wrestler, this is ridiculous. And certainly by now, nobody thinks that if it hadn't been for her friend being one of the EVPs, that this girl would be wrestling on national or any television. She didn't even wrestle on television in Japan. So anyway, they went through a break. And I felt bad for Jamie Hayter. It was brutal and wouldn't end. I zipped ahead somehow. Riho got umpteen false finishes. The fans were literally ready to fucking bite cyanide capsules. And finally, out of nowhere, after she's had her ass kicked by this diminutive dwarf, Hayter hits a finish out of nowhere, 1, 2, 3. Good God. Good God. I feel like Fraser Crane falling off a stage. Good God. What?
Kelsey Grammer's his real name.
Well, more people recognize Fraser Crane. So this, again, this is what the executive vice presidents, at least one of them in this case, are bringing to this program. The irrational insistence above all logic and evidence to the contrary that anybody wants to buy these untrained, self-taught, diminutive, microscopic, puzzled, confused, former Japanese scrub women and pop idols as professional wrestlers. Can we go to the main event?
I just want to say, I agree with you about Hayter. Hayter either has potential or Hayter's ready, but she's really good. And she's got size, and she has a look, and she could bump, and she works smart, it seems. Unfortunately, you have to work with who you have to work with, and I don't care who you like there. You know, Serena Deeb, Thunder Rosa, Britt Baker. Eventually, you run into a wall of the booking. Now it's going to get a lot worse because Kenny's back, and his favorites are going to start getting all the airtime again. Because we got away from that for a bit. My boyfriend's
back, and you're going to be in trouble. Hey, ya, Kenny's back.
It was hey la, not hey ya.
Well, whatever it was.
Hayter's really good. They just need to do something with her.
Well, they did something else. The AEW title was on the line in the main event. Out of nowhere, Cinderella story, Penthouse gets a title shot, even though they're advertising the big main event between MJF and Moxley, so they were put in the position where they had to say, if Moxley retains tonight, then he'll face MJF in the main event of the pay-per-view. Oh, but the flip side of that coin is if Penthouse wins, the main event at the pay-per-view would be Penthouse against MJF. And right there, that alone tells everybody this title ain't changing hands tonight. And I've seen the match. We've seen the match every time Moxley gets in the ring and every time the other guy gets in the ring. So it was what you would expect it to be based on previous observations. But the story in this was the finish and the aftermath, or the afterbirth, as we used to say in the wrestling business before the wrestling business was stripped of its vocabulary. Moxley hits 2 of the double-arm DDTs. I think Sockface called one of them one thing and one of them the other thing. I think if he accidentally drops them on their head, it's a paradigm shift, but if he turns them all the way over safe, like he does with the Japanese legends, it's a Death Rider, or vice versa. I don't know. But he hit 2 of those, 1, 2, 3. And then suddenly here comes the Firm. And no, it wasn't. And by the way, it wasn't, I guess, Robert Palmer and the Firm. It was Paul Rogers I was trying to think of last week. But nevertheless, he wasn't there either. Here comes William Morrissey, W. Morrissey, the William Morris Agency. God damn it, he should bring a cat with him. That would fuck everybody up. There comes Morrissey. See, Morris would be the cat, and Morrissey, all right. And the other, are you still here? Is this thing on?
Apparently.
Okay. And the other page.
Sadly.
And here's the Guns. And then here comes Stokely walking out afterwards, after the wrestlers have already got in and start doing some damage. And they get heat on Moxley. And remember, MJF said no. And finally, security runs down, but the security gets beat up and then disappears. Apparently, they were all given the ancient Oriental Gung Fu Bruce Lee palm of death, and when they went down, they died and could never get back up again. But at least they tried again with security. And then you get a shot of Officer Barbrady in the back with his microphone stance, where it looks like somebody forgot to take half of the coat hanger out of his jacket. His arms up there. And you're seeing on camera that the Blackpool Combat Club's locker room door has been chained shut. And there's one guy there going, I've got to get some bolt cutters or whatever. And off he runs. They actually stole the angle from WCW at the Clash of Champions in Cleveland, Ohio, in what was it, 1989 or 1990?
1989. It was the angle
89
that alienated Giant Baba from
that destroyed the 25 or 30-year relationship between Giant Baba and the NWA and WCW in one night by chaining. So the Blackpool Combat Club can't come to help Moxley because the dressing room door has been chained shut. And the TV camera, the announcers, the security, everybody knows about it long enough to set up a live shot. But son of a bitch, nobody ever found bolt cutters. But anyway, we come back to the ring, and here comes MJF. And he comes out and shoves him back off of Moxley and fires Stokely, and they turn around and beat up MJF. And as I mentioned earlier in the program, a turn always, the Dusty Rhodes turn against Gary Hart's Army, whatever, when you have groups that are all equal, that have all been together for a long time, that have history amongst them. Sting being kicked out of the Horsemen after that, long drawn out saga, or Ole turning babyface and laying in wait for 2 years to stab Dusty in the back, or we can go on and on. But right here, you had 5 interchangeable right now job guys, with the only guys really getting any attention being the Gun Boys, and the rest of them having been on TV or not on TV or just got to the company, never been used in a prominent position, and a manager that's been there for 6 weeks, and they're all kicking the shit out of really overall the most valuable young talent in the company. And they not only beat him up, but they took him out to ringside and they put him through a table. Because, God damn it, I'm telling you, there's nothing going to cause any more attention and people to be outraged than somebody on a wrestling program in this day and age going through a fucking table. So, as we mentioned, between the adolescent childishness of the smear campaign of the Bucks and Olivier, to badmouth Punk behind his back and damage that relationship because they were shown up by him, to Jericho, the Canned Ham Society, the Appreciation Society, him knowing how to manipulate Tony for his creative ends, moving Punk out of the way. Let's now make sure that MJF is right where we can keep an eye on him because he was getting too hot. The EVPs don't care about MJF. They won't interact with him because he's not in their social circle. They like to play with their friends exclusively. But, I have faith and confidence in MJF either doing the absolute best that anybody could with material he's given, or if he comes up with his own shit, it always making sense and it always working to his best advantage because he has a sense about that. But he's now entering into situations where he's still not the boss, and Tony Khan thinks he's a booker, and he's got other people he's going to be working with, and anything that's out of his control or away from his wheelhouse, there's still going to be things that are going to be contributing negatively to his overall presentation that he won't be able to control if he's put in the position I think he's about to be put in. But there you have that. So that's the way we went off the air. MJF through laying in the middle of broken furniture, flat of his back on the floor, and the Cucamonga Kids and Harpo are back apparently in somewhat control of the situation. Your thoughts on that last one, my boy?
Well, I'm not a big fan of the Moxley matches, so I'm not even going to grade it for that. He's very over with their fans. I mean, they're blasting Wild Thing, but I think when they're not blasting it, maybe there's fans.
He's over for the kind of people that like that kind of thing.
Yeah.
That's the kind of thing those people like.
Then I say, okay, I'm going to give it a chance, and I start watching it. I'm like, oh no, he's terrible. He's the worst fucking wrestler. But the angle's really the big deal here, and the angle's really the problem. I hate to say this, I was thinking about it. It feels like this is the first stuff with MJF that isn't really clicking since the Jericho feud. We had a whole year. Yeah. We had a little bit, I guess a little bit more than a year of MJF doing other things, not just Punk. He did Darby Allin, tried to do something with Pillman Jr., but I'm going to guess that wasn't MJF's fault that it didn't work out well.
Yeah.
But now it wasn't a good feeling at the end of the show. It kind of felt like, in a way, the Dark Order beating down the Young Bucks. What I'm sure all those fans felt when Tony had to take the reins in the book. I don't know about this. And for anyone arguing about MJF being a babyface, did you like seeing him as a babyface selling?
No. It's, it's like you take a natural talent away from the things they do that makes them not only natural but unique and put them in another position. And believe me, I went through it with, and neither me nor the Midnight Express was in the same position MJF is now, obviously, but we tried to be baby faces, and it only worked with the original Midnight and Heyman because there was a protagonist and an antagonist for each one of us and prior history amongst the whole group. But once that we finished with that program too early, unfortunately, and had to do anything else as baby faces, it didn't work. Because then what the people liked about our performance, our match, the way that we did fuck people around, the way that the Midnight Express wrestled, we had to change the construct of the entire match and the psychology behind it. And then we were hanging on because of our previous stellar reputation. And that's when I started looking for ways to switch back as quickly as possible. I'm very trepidatious about this. And you don't, again, just because the song is Sympathy for the Devil, you don't want to feel sympathy for the devil. You can admire the devil's awe-inspiring power and might and fucking take the ride with the devil to see what all is going to go on, but you don't want to fucking be put in a position. I wish I could do something to help him. Poor devil.
Well, on the other hand, though, to what I said earlier, the word swerve became a forbidden word amongst many for many years. It was overused and used by many poorly.
Because one guy heard the word and thought he knew what it meant and then changed the whole fucking thing.
And ran wild with it. If this is a big swerve where MJF isn't going to turn babyface and MJF may come out of the title match with the belt, whether Regal's on his side, whether he turns against Regal, whether the firm and him make up, whether he paid them to kick his ass and put him through a table, which I'm not justifying if that's what it is in any way. If it was all a swerve, do you feel like it could work? Or do you feel like, this was... No. And like you said, the firm have been, even the time they've been together, they've barely been on TV.
Well, yeah, and besides that, again, if MJF was really who MJF has presented himself as and was always purported to be, would his plan be, I'm going to take an ass kicking and potentially get injured because this is supposed to be dangerous going through a table 2 or 3 weeks or whatever before my big title match? Or can I come up with a way to be a conniving, backstabbing, evil, crooked prick without getting my ass kicked by my own people? See, it wouldn't be something MJF would do anyway. He would come up with a brilliant Machiavellian plan where he suffered as little physical damage as possible and sacrificed one of his own people in some respect, if there was any plot going to be fucking plotted. So that wouldn't be then it wouldn't make sense in hindsight. Looking back on it, it wouldn't be a good angle because it made everybody look fucking goofy. And it looks like something that Shitstain would contrive as a swerve during the Attitude Era that people just glossed over and didn't care whether it made any sense or not because Steve Austin. But that's not the case anymore.
How about a double turn where William Regal's so impressed by what MJF's doing that he ends up saying to the Blackpool Combat Club, you know what, let's go with him. And with all your amazing wrestling skills, we'll now learn how to cheat. And Moxley, who better than the plumber to lead the group of independent contractors who look like they don't belong together? It looks perfect. It sounds perfect. It would be perfect. Moxley and the firm versus MJF and the Blackpool Combat Club.
What you had earlier was actually brilliant. If MJF did somehow just a raw fuck to Moxley on pay-per-view and fucked him out of the title in the most cheating way possible. And then Regal came out and fucking embraced him because that's what he was trying to make MJF do all along, push him to that next level of treachery because he's always admired him and blah, blah, blah. And then you've got Regal and fucking MJF. If you want to do something out of all the potential scenarios we've talked about and what is apparently unfolding in front of us, that one sounds like it'd be the most fun. But he could just not have panicked and fucked with something real quick on the sperm of the moment like he does every time something happens, and take a few weeks, sit down and assess the situation.
Think about it. MJF and Regal embrace on the stage. Out from the back come the other members of the Blackpool Combat Club. Danielson and MJF shake hands. Claudio and him hug. Wheeler Yuta, before he gets a chance, MJF just pushes him off the stage.
Into a vat of boiling oil below.
Well, I didn't say that. Now you've taken it too far. You've taken it way too far.
Well, we got a budget now. Let's really do this thing right.